All right, I just click. All right, folks, welcome everyone. We're gonna start in just a few, maybe 30 seconds, 60 seconds here. And let me share my screen back. All right. Cool, welcome folks. Again, as you're joining, we're just waiting for a few more folks to join, and then we'll start. Cool. As you're joining, if you would like to tell us where you're coming from, where you're joining from, like location, city, if you would like, I think that's always interesting. So, I mean, I'm myself joining from the San Francisco Bay Area, from the East Bay. But again, if you want to put in the chat, I think that's always interesting. So, Brian, do you think we should start?
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Well, very good. Well, welcome everyone. Cool. So welcome everyone to our first online meetup, introduction to Okta Workflows. So for the next 50 or so minutes, we're going to do this our agenda. So we do hello and welcome, and that's what we're doing now. We're going to spend just really a few minutes on what is Okta Workflows. And then we want to spend most of the time actually building and showing how it works. So Brian is going to do the first demo, and I'll do the second demo. And then we'll see if you have any questions. First, Brian, do you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Yeah, so my name is Bryan. I'm based in Seattle, Washington as well. It looked like we had at least one Seattle person here. So welcome everyone. I'm on the Workflows advocacy team. Along with Max, we do things like host office hours and review and ship templates into the product and things like that.
Cool, very good. Yes, and I'm Max Katz. I had the community for Workflows, and I'm based. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, again in the East Bay. And yeah, my email there. If you have any questions, again, I always love getting emails from people. So again, whether it's something you want to say, hey, something is wonderful, but if you also want to say, hey, something sucks, that's fine too. Please send those questions or feedback. Now, I'm just want to make sure, I'm going to stop sharing for just a second. And I want to make sure that this is being recorded. All right, it is. I apologize. We had some folks who are not able to join, and they wanted to make sure that, well, I want to make sure that this will be recorded. All right. So what is Okta Workflows? Workflows allows to automate identity processes. It allows to replace custom scripts or code with no-code logic and connections. Now, what does this mean? So, let's say in your organization, when you have a person joining your company or your team, you need to do a number of steps. You need to give them access to this application and this application, and maybe do something else and send them a notification. So now before, you would write the script yourself, or you could go to the IT people or even to developers and say, hey, can you build this for me, right? I need to have this workflow when people join, when people leave. And probably they would say, sure, we'll do this in 3-4 months. And so that's how it kind of worked before, and probably works in many places today. But with Workflows, you can actually do that stuff yourself. And what I love is that there's no code. You do it with no code. You do it in a visual way, right? And again, you're going to see that in just a few minutes when we do the demos. But you can use no code to automate identity processes. So for example, what you see here, this is just a high level example. So usually a workflow starts when something happens. So an event occurs. So in this case, a user is assigned to Salesforce, right? And as I said, you can run any number of sort of logic steps, like do this, step 1, step 2, and step 3. So in this case, we're checking, hey, is this person on the North America sales team? And if yes, we will assign them to North America territory in Salesforce. And then we're going to also add them to a Slack channel for North America. But you can also send them an email, right? You can send their manager email. You can do many other things. I mean, you can even send them an SMS message and welcome them. Okay. So let me give you a few more high-level examples before we jump into the demos. So onboarding, offboarding. So the example at the top, this is the one that I just shared, where someone joins, they're assigned to Salesforce, or there's an account in Salesforce, and then they're assigned to the territory, and then they get also assigned to a Slack channel. But of course, it also works when people leave, right? So that's the example at the bottom. So a person gets suspended in your organization, then you look up who is their manager, and then you transfer all their resources. In this case, it's Box, but of course it can be Google, it can be Microsoft, and any other resources really. You transfer to their manager perhaps, and then you can delete the user and so on. So, and again, you can do this all in a visual way without writing any code. All right, let's look at another example. So I mentioned that something needs to happen, like an event occurs, and then the workflow is then invoked, but it doesn't need to be, well, it doesn't need to be an event. It can also be time-based. You can schedule a flow to run periodically. It could be every hour, it could be every day, every week. So in this example, we're checking if someone signed an NDA, and if yes, we give them access to some resources. Now, you could also say, you could check, let's say you check 5 times, and if this person still hasn't signed an NDA, then you can maybe email their manager as an example, hey, or something like that. So that's also, you can also build that kind of functionality. Also security, right? So you can protect your applications from data breaches. So the top example, this is actually what Bryan is going to build in just really 2 or so minutes. But again, you can get all the active users with particular status. You can see how their status changed. So for example, if they're active or not within some period of days. And if not, if they're not active, then you can maybe suspend them, or you can cancel their licenses for various applications, right? So, why pay for their account if you're not using it? Another example, kind of a security example, is that, a user might report suspicious activity, and then you send them a Slack notification message like, hey, did you just report this? And if they confirm, you then say, well, we're going to reset your password. We're going to sort of invalidate all your sessions. If that's really, kind of you said, yeah, that's activity was recorded or reported. All right, and I think the last example here, this is, you can give access to guest users. So again, a user was added to your organization, and then you check if the user exists or not, and then you can give them, for example, create an account in Office 365. But again, there could be a lot of other systems that workflows support out of the box. And now also, just to mention, if there is no connection available out of the box, you can also connect to any external system via just an external API. So that's also possible. But anyhow, this example, and then you notify them that the account was created. All right, I think this is the first demo that Bryan is going to build, and this is the one where we find out people who are not active for X number of days. But Bryan, I'll let you take it from here.
All right. So I will go ahead and start sharing. Max, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. Cool. So to just kind of build on what Max was talking about, before I build my demo, let's go ahead and just take a quick look at the Workflows product. So when you sign in, you'll see this welcome page. And we have a lot of resources here linked, tutorial videos, getting started, tutorials, links to training, which is free, documentation. I think I mentioned when I introduced myself that my team helps work on these templates. These are another great spot once you get access to kind of get started. We have a lot of kind of pre-built examples. And just so you all know, this template is essentially what I'm going to be building today. So if any of you have any questions or want to review things, you're actually able to go into templates and just install this, and that'll kind of give you some reference for what we're working on today. So this view is the actual workflow console where our flows live. The use case that I'm going to be building today is essentially a time-based use case where we look through all our users and try to determine which users have not signed in a specified number of days. And essentially, we're going to write those users to a table within Workflows. From there, it's very easy to either send the table out as a report. You can iterate through the users in the table and do things like go ahead and suspend them if they haven't used their account in long enough, or contact their managers, anything like that. So let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to start and just set up our table that we're going to use. And I'm going to give it a few column names that I know that we're going to need. Basically, I want to write down each user that hasn't signed in my specified time window, and I want to track some information about them, like their ID, their username, maybe the day that I checked on there. Sorry, my autofill is going crazy. Maybe the day that I ran the report. Just kind of whatever values I think I might need until later to pull out of this report. So I'm going to add date checked. Sorry, I can't get that password manager to go away. Apologies. Well, so I think this should be good. I'm just kind of setting up our table and we'll be able to write our report in here. So I just want to give kind of a base schema, some of the different attributes that I think I might want to keep track of. So cool, that looks good. We have a table here in our Workflows Meetup folder. And now let's go ahead and get started building our actual logic. So for every workflow that runs, there's typically going to be an event that kicks it off. We have a wide variety of connectors to different services. We have an Okta connector, obviously. So you could kick off events on things like, a user being added to a group or a user being created in Okta, maybe even a row being added to a Google Sheet, something like that. In this case, we're just going to schedule this flow. The idea being that we can run it on, some determined frequency. I think right now I'll just set it up for every day, but we have flexible scheduling here. So you can set it up different days of the week, different times, every month. I'll just start running it every day. But it's really easy to kind of get a cron job going here. Cool. So what I'm also going to do, my very first move here in this flow, I'm going to go ahead and just add a card that will, if I can find my table. Essentially, I'm going to just clear out my table every time that I run this so that I have a fresh report each time. But I can't seem to find that. All right, so we'll just keep moving on. And basically, the juice of this workflow is going to be this lists users with search card. We have a few different options here in terms of how you can return records. You can either do the first matching record, or like basically the first page of records from the API. We're going to go ahead and use this stream matching records. This will allow us to get quite a few records back. It can go all the way up into like hundreds of thousands and millions. So we'll go ahead and kind of pick out some criteria here. I think I need status because I care about basically all active users who aren't using their accounts. And I think that this should be good. And now if you see here, it wants me to pick another flow. I'm actually unable to save until I pick a flow. Essentially, the way that this works, every user that gets returned in that search will be fed into another flow. So you can almost think about it like, in a programming language, if you were going to run like a for each loop or do something to iterate over your users, this is kind of a similar concept. And every user that gets returned from our search will be fed into this other flow for processing. So we'll go ahead and add just a couple values here. Basically, this record object will contain each user that gets passed through. And the state object is something where we can actually pass like our own static kind of value from this parent flow, as it's called, to this other helper flow. So we'll go ahead and name some keys here. Basically, these should give us like the Okta user ID, the date of their last login, and then their email. We'll also add just kind of a variable here. This is going to be just kind of a static number that we pass in, so we can set how many days that we care about. So turn this on. See if I can find that table now. There we go. All right. One other thing to point out when you're using these, oh, sorry, so it wouldn't let me save because I hadn't selected this flow. Cool. Yeah, so one thing I was going to point out in this record limit on this search card, list users with search, you can actually set a limit on how many records you want to return. In my test tenant here, I have a few 100,000 users. So in the interest of time, I'll drop this record limit down to something a little more reasonable. Cool. And then, oh, I guess my save worked. Be the value that we're going to just feed through. This is where we're going to determine how many days we're looking at since their last login that we're going to consider the account stale. Okay, let's go back to this flow here. So I already know about this edge case from kind of working on this, use case before, but essentially I've wound up with errors in the past if you pull back a user who's never logged in. That might count in our search. If we're searching for last login, less than or greater than a date, we're just going to use this card to continue if to basically say, okay, we only want to continue and do stuff if they've logged in. If they haven't even logged in yet, then they're not really a stale account. So I have a number of useful date cards. This one just spits out a timestamp of the current time as it runs and hits this card. So it's really useful for coming up with like dynamic queries. Basically, we're going to subtract our start date from the time window that we're going to specify. And this will be the date that we kind of care about for the users. This is the window that we're deciding that an account is stale. Does that make sense? So now let's go ahead and do another check. And basically, we want to see if the date that they last logged in is less than, maybe just less than our time window date. If it's not less than that, then the account is not stale. All right. And so I'm just going to kind of keep using a few of these date cards. Actually, they're very useful. So in my table, I set up a value called a column called time window days, where I kind of want to see that basically how far past being stale they are. So I'll kind of use this date difference now, and basically I'll take the date that it is today, and then their last login will be the start date. So you can kind of just get an actual numeric count of how many days that is. And let's see. If I recall correctly, this one can actually spit out like decimal values, which I don't really want. So I'm just going to go ahead and use a number function to round the value. And then from here, assuming that we've passed all these checks and the user's last login is outside of our window that we determined, and they've logged in, then we'll go ahead and add those users to our table. All right. And so we'll use all of these columns that I set up before. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit so I can see everything. Essentially, user ID will just come drag it all the way over. Their last login value will drag over. The last login days, that's going to be the difference between today and when they last logged in. So that's the result of this value here. The date checked, that should just be now. And finally, the username that can come from login. So unless I mess something up, I think we should be able to go ahead and test this. So I'll go back to my parent flow that kicks off the process and feeds the users into this helper flow. And we'll just go ahead and test it and see if things work. All right, so that's still going, but let's go over to our helper and see if we start to see, oh goodness, so we have lots of users coming in here. So see, most of these are not stale. You can see that things are starting to happen. So far things are looking very good. We're getting users back. It seems like our logic is working. We're getting users to our table. And if you notice here, it's only users whose last login was greater than 30 days. So we have some Januaries in here. And yeah, from here it'd be very easy to just upload, programmatically upload this file somewhere for reporting. You could send it to yourself in an email or otherwise, or you could even have another process which maybe says, okay, later let's go through and grab each of these users and suspend them because they're outside of our policy, or maybe send them an email and let them know that we will be suspending them in a week, or et cetera, et cetera. The sky's really the limit. So yeah, I think that is all the time that I have. So thanks very much. Back to you, Max.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Brian. There was I think there are 2 questions about your demo in the Q&A. But no, this was very good. Let me share my screen back.
Yeah, Ashish, I'm answering on the Q&A, but in this case, we're talking about logins to Okta specifically.
All right. Oh, sorry. Here we go. So in the second demo, what I'm going to show you, so we just released a new capability where you can create a backup of your flow, or actually a folder that a folder can contain more than just one flow. So let me show you how you can do that. So you can build a flow that would automatically back up your flow. So you don't need to do it manually anymore, or sort of export the files and save it locally somewhere, for example. So you can do it automatically. So this is the second demo. So let me show you. So let's create a new flow, and we'll give this a name. So backup folder backup. Then give it a description. Wow. All right. Okay. So as we shared before, so one way to trigger a flow if an event happens. So again, like a new user was added to your organization. Another way is based on time. So you can again run it every hour, every day, every week. So that's what we're going to do here. And so add event, and then I'm going to do schedule. And this is very, very flexible. But let's say I want to do it every day at 9 a.m. So every day at 9 a.m., we would like to create a backup of a particular folder. All right, so it's safe. Okay. Now, the next step is we want to, well, so which folder we would like to create backup for. And so we're going to add a function. And so this is right here, we got the flow. So you can back up and just one flow, but you can also do a folder, right? So this is the new capability that was just added, again, 2 weeks ago or so. Let's click on folder. And then there is one sort of action, export folder. And then we're going to choose a folder. And so this is the one. So this is the flow that Brian just built. And also we have a template for that, right? So you can actually add a template to your dashboard and kind of learn how it works that way as well. But let's click on this folder. All right. So now because we're going to be saving the file, a backup file every day, we want to change the file just a little bit. But we would like to add a timestamp to the file name. Okay. So for that, we're going to use I'm going to use the time card, and I think Bryan used that in his demo. And then we will also use a concatenate card, because what we want to do is we want to have the file name and then the time. Okay, so we're going to get the file name from here. So this is the output from the export folder. So you can see it has 3 items that we get back: the actual file, the file name, and the size. So we're going to take the file, and then we'll put an underscore here, and then create a 3rd field and get the time, right? So it just creates a string out of these 3 strings, okay? So we get the file name, underscore, and then the current time. And then finally, we're gonna add an app action, I should say, and this is the Google Drive one, right? And then the upload file is right here. All right, so the name, this is the name of the file, and so it's right here. So we're going to create a connection. Now, you can put it in your sort of root folder in Google Drive, but I would like to put it in a folder, and so I need to get a folder ID, and this is the ID in the URL. And now description, it's optional, but we can say folder backup, for example. And then finally, the actual file. So we take the file from here and make a connection like this. And that should do it. Let's save. All right. And now we can test. All right. So this was, we can see the flow execution here. Well, let's go here, and you can see that this file here was just added to my folder, right? So again, the way I set up my flow is it will run every morning at 9 a.m. I also want to mention, just in general, like this view here, when you see the execution, this is my favorite sort of feature or capability in workflows, because it really allows you to see how the flow is being executed and how the data flows from card to card or step to step. I mean, this is extremely powerful where you can see that. So again, I love this. And then, of course, this is just a single execution, but you saw Bryan's demo had a lot of different runs, but I can, of course, run it again. And then we'll see another it was there and then it disappeared. Let's see here. Here we go. We got 2 rounds here. But anyhow, this is the demo. This is the second demo that I wanted to show you. Again, the ability to back up. You can do Google Drive. You can also do GitHub, and there is a template available that, again, you can use. But again, the value here is that, instead of before you would sort of do a lot of manual work, now you can use workflows to actually create a backup of your flows. And you can do it automatically every day if you like, or every week, and so on. Now, if you don't want to have a schedule of when to run, you can also just click test. It is a manual step, but the actual backup will be still done automatically by the flow. So you can just click test, and it will again save into Google Drive. All right. Let me go back here and back here. All right. So we also want to share some resources. And if you go to this link, and I should probably, once I'm done, once we go into Q&A, I'll share this in the chat. But it's just a link. It's a page with all the resources that you would you need for workflows, right? To help you where you can ask questions, tutorials, documentation, templates, community, office hours, training. There is a Slack community, and I think a few other things. So again, instead of sending you multiple links, we just created one page where there's everything that you would need to help you with workflows. I think that's it. Bryan, do you have anything before we go into Q&A? Anything you want to sort of share, add?
Not off the top of my head. Yeah, I'd encourage everyone to take a look at the templates in the product. Both the demos that Max and I showed should be available in there for you to kind of pick apart. A lot of those also have videos and documentation that go along with them that can kind of help shed light on how things work.
Cool. Oh, and thank you, Chase, for pasting the link to the resources in the chat. Thank you. All right, so yeah, if you can use the Q&A and ask questions. Let's see here.
Let's see, I can try to tackle a couple here. So, Gareth, from the application vendor's side, what are the requirements to be used with workflows? Essentially, workflows can be used with any. Actually, I might just share quickly, Max. I'll drop this link in the chat here. So these are examples of like our pre-built, like productized connectors that our teams have built actions and things for, but it's also possible to, sorry, my Zoom thing is in the way. There we go. So not only is it possible to actually expose a workflow as an API endpoint. So like if you have a third-party, application vendor that can send hooks into workflows, you can actually invoke workflows from another system. So like we have templates that show how you can, like if a user signs an NDA in DocuSign, for instance, you can kick off a flow and populate their attribute, etc. Additionally, we also have like generic HTTP connectors and API connectors. So furthermore, if you have a service that you want to use that we haven't built anything for yet, and you know how to use their API, you can just make all the calls yourself and really interact with any service beyond just the ones that we've already made. So yeah, I hope that helps, Gareth. Charles, test seems equivalent to run now, as it actually created the backup file. Is there a test that essentially runs the logic but doesn't make actual changes? So that's a great point. When you click this test button, like I even did it here. So this kind of shows when my schedule would run. I have like 23 hours to go, but if you click test, it runs the flow. So you certainly can think of it as like a run now button. In terms of how you could test things without making changes, there's not really. My advice would be to kind of go in and you can use, one trick is to use like, really just at a high level, I would build in branching to prevent the changes that I'm scared about making. For instance, if at the end of this flow, I actually wanted to suspend all the users, but I want to test it, make sure that it works first, you could do something like continue if 1 equals 2, and it never will. So then anything past then will never get run. So there's a few strategies like that, but there isn't like a dummy test where everything just runs through and doesn't actually happen.
Yeah, Bryan, I think you can also use a return card to stop the execution, I think.
Yeah, return card works. You could even do something like a if-else card and just say, okay, put my logic that I don't want to run inside of a branch that I set to never run. Stick things here and then just pull them out when you're done. So anyways, I hope those strategies kind of help you. But yeah, basically clicking the test button will run your flow.
Yeah. I mean, you could also, another option perhaps is, the Google Drive. I mean, you can have two different sort of accounts, right? Or connections. One that's sort of the production, and perhaps one maybe that's kind of a test, and then maybe there it's fine to save the files there.
And as Stephen just pointed out in the chat, you can import and export like whole folders of flows or individual flows, and then import them into other environments. My strong recommendation for anyone here would be to build always in a preview environment that's similar to your prod. And if you can, even have connections to preview tenants of things. Because honestly, it's a lot better to test the way that things will actually work and see that the results, are what you want and that you don't run into edge cases, etc. So yeah, anyways, strongly recommend that everyone build in a preview environment. Mohammed, can we use workflows in an Okta trial tenant? I want to say no, I don't believe that you can, but I would reach out to your account executives, because there is like a workflows starter pack in which you can get a few free flows to get started. So not like a trial tenant, but if you have a preview tenant or even a prod tenant, you can get a couple free flows. So you can take a look around and get started. Okay. Sorry, lots of questions here. So Andrew, are there any API limits we should be aware of, or limits to how many workflows we can create for our tenant? Yes. So yes to both. Basically, the way that these cards work, like list users with search, or if I created a user or whatever, these are just calling Okta's API under the hood. So essentially, yes, any calls that you make from workflows to your Okta tenants API, that will count against those just general Okta API limits that you have. Additionally, we have some, I can't remember where the page is, but there are limits to how many flows you can have, and that's based on which plan that you buy. So that's here, flow limits. I just posted that in chat. So hope that helps, Andrew. Basically, yes, the API limits for workflows are just the same API limits that exist for Okta. And so when you call your Okta API from workflows, you're kind of beholden to those limits. But here's a couple other pages that just kind of show the general limitations of the system. All right. Okay, so similar to workflows, do we have any upcoming hooks session? I can't speak to that. Max and I work specifically on the workflows product. So apologies, Raksha.
But if you have any, if you would like to see anything workflows related, please let us know. We've got our emails. So I know there was a chat, a message that, for example, covering a specific template, like, so Bryan, what you did, I think you did a high level overview, but I think some folks were interested, hey, can we do a session on just a template and nothing else? So that's one idea. But yeah, any other ideas, suggestions, we would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I thought that was a cool idea as well. Because I know my my demos when I drink coffee can go a little fast. So, so let's see. Diksha, I'm not sure that I understand your question. I'm not sure if you can. You're very welcome, Raksha. I'm not sure if you can maybe elaborate in the chat, but there isn't like an API for workflows. Workflows can call like basically any API. So like I showed here, you can construct JSON and do posts and puts, and there's really no end to what you could work with in theory. You know, you can even set up like custom OAuth connections to services. So yeah, I hope that helps. There's not really a way to interact with workflows via some API. You can call workflows and like hit this invoke URL. Yeah, anyways, I hope that kind of helps make sense of that. But if you want to clarify, if that didn't address it, that'd be great. Okay, one more from Gareth. So where there's a workflow that includes account provisioning or deprovisioning, will that be done through the API, or does it need something like Skim? Man, trying to assess if we need to be in the vendor's enterprise price plan. Yeah, so I think that really depends like vendor to vendor. You know, I'm sure a lot of vendors use Skim and Skim APIs to provision users. Like for instance, I know Zoom and a handful of other ones do, but I don't think there's like a blanket answer for every service. Like I think we'll charge for different tiers differently and have different technical requirements. So I'm sorry, I know that's vague, but I feel like that's the best answer I can give.
And there's one more, I think more questions, but there's one question from Venugopal. When is the next session? So we will try to schedule maybe in a few weeks, so in March, maybe end of March. But do let us know what you would like us to cover. I mean, just in general, we want to run these sessions kind of on a regular basis. I don't know whether it's once every 2 weeks or I don't know, maybe even more often. But again, do let us know like what topics you would like us to cover, because that will help us a lot.
All right, Charles, I can't remember, but I don't believe that you can use like there are certain limitations in terms of shared drives. I can't remember all of those off the top of my head, but I would just encourage you to check out the connector reference, which I just answered your question with the link to that page. And essentially you can see all of the actions and events that we have support for across all the different like built-in connectors that we have. So yeah, sorry, I don't know off the top of my head, but I would just check the OneDrive and Google Drive docs there and look at the actions you want to take and see if you're able to do what you want. So yeah, sorry, I know that was a little vague as well. Yeah, I hope that helps, Charles. And then looks like we have one more question. I don't really understand this one. I'd like to know workflows on MFA, like accessing this console, you would like an MFA prompt? I don't know, if you can clarify that MFA one, I might be able to tackle it, but I'm not sure I understand. Add users to Okta group from Excel sheet, that is certainly possible. I would say yes, you can do that. Are there any triggers event hooks that would work with a deactivated user? Let's see. I know there's some caveats there, because like, typically when I try to make API calls against deactivated users, it doesn't work. So I think the way that I see people handle things a lot of times is like using groups and basically staging some things. Like if you were trying to use a workflow, I would maybe think about moving the users first to some group called deactivated or, whatever. And then you can actually have a flow that listens for when users get added to this deactivated group. And then you can go ahead and make all the different calls you need, like remove them from their groups, deprovision them from whatever. So you can almost use the event of adding them to this deprovision group to be the kickoff to like do whatever other processes you need, and then eventually go ahead and deprovision them or deactivate them. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. Reset MFA for requested users, that should be possible. There's certainly APIs that you can do MFA resets and things like that. It'll vary use case by use case. Let's see, we have one about SMS, like locking and unlocking users. The first point, yes, we have a Twilio connector and you can almost certainly send an SMS to the users when they're locked, but I don't think there's any notion of like waiting for a response from those texts. So I think you need to find some other way to unlock them. I don't think that text would work. See, I think I got the MFA question, and then all right, cool.
Yeah, there's a question on Slack community. So yeah, there is a Slack workspace called Mac Admins, and so there's a link in the resources link that we shared. So yeah, you just need to go there and ask to join, and then yes, there is a pretty active Slack channel there on that Slack workspace.
Cool.
Well, cool. I love this. I love all the questions, and I know we're almost well, we're out of time. So I want to say thank you, everyone. Thank you for all the questions. Thank you for joining us. Please do let us know. This was our first event, but we want to, as I said, run a lot more on kind of have a schedule. Do let us know what you want to cover in the context of workflows. So that's what we kind of do. But Brian, I don't know, do you have anything else? Oh, well, sorry, before we will send a message to all of you who registered with some resources and also a link to the replay. So we'll do that.
Yeah, nothing from me except just thank you everyone for taking the time to join us today. It was fun. Awesome.
Yeah, thank you everyone. And yeah, we'll hope to see you at our next event. Bye-bye.